Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it. Then let's evaluate together. The rain fell in a soft, relentless drizzle, painting Greenhaven Park in shades of gray. The air was thick with the scent of wet grass and city asphalt, the distant hum of Chicago traffic muffled by the patter of drops on leaves. Nathan Caldwell stood under a sagging oak tree, his white dress shirt clinging to his broad shoulders, soaked through by the storm. His dark brown hair was plastered to his forehead, and his piercing green eyes burned with a mix of desperation and resolve. Across from him, Maya Robinson stood on the gravel path, her arms crossed, her brown eyes blazing with a storm of their own. Hurt, love, and a resolve that cut deeper than the rain. "I waited for you, Nathan," Maya said, her voice trembling but fierce, cutting through the whisper of the rain. "All those nights, all those moments, I thought you felt it too. But you never chose me." Nathan took a step closer, rain streaming down his chiseled face, his breath ragged. "Maya, I did feel it. I've loved you for years. I was just too damn scared to say it." His voice cracked, raw with the weight of a truth he'd buried too long. Her eyes widened, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. She was radiant even now, hours before she'd become a bride, her curly hair loose and damp, clinging to her warm brown skin. Her simple jeans and sweater couldn't hide the strength in her frame, the fire in her spirit. "Scared?" she said, her laugh bitter but soft. "You're Nathan Caldwell, the guy who built an empire from nothing. But you couldn't tell me you loved me?" "I'm telling you now," he said, closing the distance between them. His hands reached for hers, tentative, his fingers trembling as they brushed her skin. "I love you, Maya. I've always loved you." She didn't pull away, but her eyes searched his, torn between longing and pain. "It's too late," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Elliot, he's been there. He saw me when you didn't. I can't hurt him. I won't." Nathan's chest tightened, the truth of her words a knife in his heart. But he couldn't let go. Not yet. He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing the rain from her cheeks, and for a moment, the world stopped. Her breath hitched, her lips parting, and then he kissed her. A desperate, fiery kiss that poured out years of unspoken love. She kissed him back, her hands clutching his shirt, their bodies pressed close, warmth against the cold rain. It was a kiss that held everything they could have been, everything they'd lost. But then she pulled away, her eyes glistening. "I'm sorry, Nathan," she said, stepping back, her voice barely audible. "You had your chance." She turned and walked away, her figure blurring in the rain, leaving Nathan alone under the oak, his heart shattered. How did they get here? How did a chance meeting at a gala turn into this moment, where a billionaire and a community leader found themselves tangled in a love too late to save? Stay with me, and I'll take you back to the beginning, to the night Nathan Caldwell met Maya Robinson and felt his world shift. This is a story about love, regret, and the choices that define us. Hit that subscribe button now, and let's dive in. 3 years earlier, Nathan Caldwell was out of his element. The gala at the Chicago Cultural Center was a glittering affair. Crystal chandeliers, live jazz, and a sea of tuxedos and gowns. At 38, Nathan was the CEO of Apex Innovations, a tech empire that had revolutionized social media and made him a billionaire. His face was a fixture in Forbes and Wired, his name synonymous with power. But tonight, he felt like an imposter. Ray, his assistant and confidant, had snuck the event into his schedule, insisting he needed to get out more. Nathan had agreed, mostly to shut Ray up, but now, surrounded by champagne flutes and small talk, he regretted it. He stood by a marble pillar, sipping a bourbon, his tailored tuxedo accentuating his broad shoulders and lean frame. His dark brown hair was neatly styled, his green eyes sharp but restless. He was used to boardrooms and private jets, not charity galas where people networked under the guise of generosity. He was about to signal Ray to get him out of there when he saw her. Maya Robinson stood on a small stage, speaking to the crowd about Bright Futures, her nonprofit that taught tech skills to underserved youth. Her voice was clear, passionate, cutting through the room's chatter like a blade. She wore a simple emerald green dress that hugged her curves, her curly hair cascading over her shoulders, her warm brown skin glowing under the spotlight. But it was her eyes, deep, fierce, full of purpose, that stopped Nathan cold. She wasn't just beautiful. She was alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maya said, her southern lilt warm but commanding, "our kids deserve more than scraps. They deserve skills, opportunities, a chance to build their own futures. That's what Bright Futures is about, showing them they're worth it." The crowd applauded, but Nathan barely heard it. He was transfixed, his bourbon forgotten. When Maya stepped off the stage, he moved without thinking, weaving through the crowd to intercept her. "Nice speech," he said, offering a smile that had closed billion-dollar deals. "You've got a way of making people listen." Maya turned, her eyes narrowing slightly as she sized him up. "Thanks," she said, her tone polite but guarded. "And you are?" "Nathan," he said, hesitating only a moment. He could have added Caldwell, CEO of Apex, but something told him she wouldn't care. "Just a guy impressed by your work." She raised an eyebrow, her lips twitching. "Just a guy, huh? In a tux that costs more than my rent? I'm Maya Robinson, and I'm guessing you're not here for the kids." He chuckled, caught off guard by her directness. "Ouch. You don't pull punches, do you?" "Not when I smell corporate agendas," she said, crossing her arms. "Let me guess. You're here to write a check and feel good about yourself?" The jab stung, but Nathan leaned into it, intrigued. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm curious about a woman who calls out big tech in front of a room full of donors. You got a problem with my company's privacy policies?" Maya's eyes sparkled with challenge. "Oh, honey, I got a list. Want me to start with data harvesting or the algorithm biases?" They sparred for 10 minutes, their debate sharp but playful, drawing curious glances from the crowd. Nathan was hooked. Her mind was as quick as her wit, her passion infectious. When he offered to buy her a drink, she hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but only if you admit your app's addictive by design." "Deal," he said, grinning, and led her to the bar. Their hands brushed as he handed her a glass of wine, a jolt of electricity passing between them. Her fingers lingered a moment too long, and Nathan caught the faintest flush on her cheeks. Up close, he could smell her perfume, jasmine and vanilla, and see the gold flecks in her eyes. His pulse quickened, a feeling he hadn't known in years. "Careful, Nathan," she said, her voice low, teasing. "You keep looking at me like that. I might think you're trouble." "Only the good kind," he replied, his tone husky, and the air between them crackled with unspoken possibility. Over the next few weeks, Nathan found excuses to see Maya. He attended Bright Futures events, claiming it was for corporate social responsibility, but Ray saw through him. "You're smitten, boss," Ray teased, his dry humor cutting. "Never seen you ditch a board meeting for a community center before." "Shut it, Ray," Nathan said, but he couldn't deny it. Bright Futures was a world away from his glass and steel office. The center, housed in a repurposed warehouse, buzzed with life. Kids coding on old laptops, volunteers organizing workshops, jazz music spilling from a speaker. Maya was the heart of it, her laugh echoing as she helped a teenager debug a program or serve jambalaya at a fundraiser. Nathan, in jeans and a flannel shirt to blend in, felt out of place but alive. he learned about her life in bits and pieces. Maya had grown up in a tight-knit black community on Chicago's South Side, raised by parents who believed in education. Her mother, Clara, was a former teacher, now battling diabetes, and Maya's drive came from her, along with her love for jazz and soul food. She was raising funds for a bigger community center, a place where kids could learn, create, and feel safe. Her resilience, her fire, drew Nathan in like a moth to a flame. "All right, Mr. Big Shot," she said one night, leaning against a table at Bright Futures, her pencil tucked behind her ear. "Why do you keep showing up? You're not here for the jambalaya, are you?" Nathan grinned, his eyes tracing the curve of her smile. "Maybe I am. Or maybe I like the company." She snorted, but her cheeks warmed. "Flattery won't get you far, Nathan. I'm not one of your boardroom deals." "Good," he said, stepping closer, his voice low, "because I'm not looking to close a deal." Their eyes locked, and for a moment the noisy center faded. His hand brushed hers as he handed her a stack of flyers, his fingers lingering, warm against her skin. She didn't pull away, and Nathan felt his heart thud. A dangerous, exhilarating pull he couldn't ignore. But there were shadows. Elliot Hayes, Nathan's best friend since college, worked at Bright Futures with Maya. Elliot was warm, grounded, the kind of guy who remembered everyone's name and brought Maya coffee just how she liked it. Nathan noticed the way Elliot looked at her, quiet, steady, full of unspoken longing, and it stirred a flicker of jealousy he didn't want to admit. Tasha, Maya's best friend, was another complication. A firecracker with braids and a sharp tongue, she didn't trust Nathan. "He's too smooth, Maya," she said one night, her voice low as they cleaned up after an event. "Guys like him don't stick around unless they want something. He's just helping," Maya said, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She felt the pull toward Nathan, the way his gaze made her skin tingle, the way his laugh warmed her. But she'd been burned before by men who saw her as a project, not a partner. Nathan, meanwhile, was wrestling with his own demons. Every time Maya called him Nathan or teased him about his office job, he felt the weight of his secret. He wasn't just a guy who liked jazz and bad puns. He was Nathan Caldwell, billionaire, and the longer he stayed in her world, the harder it was to keep that hidden. He told himself it was to protect their connection. People changed when they knew about the money. But as he watched Maya hum a blues tune, her hips swaying as she stacked chairs, he knew he was falling hard, and the truth was a ticking bomb. That's where our story begins. A man with everything, chasing a woman who makes him feel like he has nothing to lose. But secrets don't stay buried, and Nathan's is about to change it all. If that rain-soaked kiss between Nathan and Maya hit you, hit that subscribe button and join us for their journey. Would you have kissed him back or walked away like Maya? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep this story going. The air inside Bright Futures was electric, buzzing with the kind of energy that only a community pulling together could create. The repurposed warehouse in Chicago's South Side was transformed for the night, its concrete walls draped with strings of fairy lights that cast a warm, golden glow. The scent of Maya Robinson's jambalaya wafted from a buffet table, mingling with the sharp tang of lemonade and the faint musk of old wood. A local jazz trio filled the space with a soulful saxophone melody, the notes weaving through the chatter of neighbors, volunteers, and kids from the center. It was jazz night, a fundraiser to keep Bright Futures tech programs running, and the place was alive with hope. Nathan Caldwell slipped through the crowd, feeling more at home than he had any right to. Gone was the tailored tuxedo of the gala where he'd first met Maya. Tonight, he wore a navy flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, and jeans that made him blend in with the eclectic mix of attendees. His dark brown hair was slightly tousled, and his green eyes scanned the room, searching for her. At 38, Nathan was the billionaire CEO of Apex Innovations, a tech empire that had redefined social media. But here, in Maya's world, he was just Nathan, a guy who showed up early to move tables and stayed late to stack chairs, all for a chance to see her smile. Maya was everywhere, a whirlwind of purpose and grace. Her curly hair bounced in a loose ponytail, and she wore a red dress that hugged her curves, the hem swaying as she moved. Her warm brown skin glowed under the lights, and her eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and determination. She was directing a teenager to adjust the stage lights, laughing with Clara about the center's finicky sound system, and checking the jambalaya like it was a sacred offering. Nathan couldn't look away. She was the heart of this place, and he was falling harder every day. "Yo, Nathan, you gonna stand there staring or help out?" Tasha Carter called from the buffet table, her braids swinging as she ladled lemonade into cups. Tasha, Maya's best friend and fellow organizer at Bright Futures, had a sharp wit and a sharper eye. She'd warmed to Nathan slightly, but still watched him like a hawk, waiting for him to slip up. "I'm helping by not spilling anything," Nathan shot back, flashing a grin that usually disarmed people. "Unless you need me to burn the jambalaya," Maya overheard, turning with a playful smirk. "Oh, you're not getting off that easy, Mr. Big Shot. Grab those chairs from the back. We're short for the band." "Yes, ma'am," Nathan said, mock saluting, catching the way her smile lingered. It sent a warmth through him, a spark he hadn't felt in years. As he hauled chairs from the storage room, Nathan marveled at how natural this felt. 3 months ago, he'd been a stranger at a gala, stumbling into Maya's orbit after a brutal day. Now he knew the kids at Bright Futures by name. Jamal, the shy coder, Kayla, the aspiring engineer, Reggie, the teen who'd started helping with events. He knew Clara, Maya's mother, made the best cornbread, that Tasha hated tech jargon, and that Maya hummed Nina Simone when she thought no one was listening. Most of all, he knew the way Maya's laugh could make the world feel right. Jazz night was Maya's vision, a fundraiser to buy new laptops for the center's coding classes. She told Nathan about it over coffee at Greenhaven Park, her eyes bright as she described empowering kids to build their futures. "It's not just about tech," she'd said, leaning across the picnic table, her fingers brushing his as she passed him a sandwich. "It's about showing them they're enough." Nathan had nodded, but inside, he was reeling. In his world, success was measured in stock prices and user metrics. Maya measured it in dreams. The center was packed now, a mix of young and old, black and white, locals and a few curious donors drawn by Maya's reputation. The jazz trio, a sax player, drummer, and bassist, all South Side legends, set up on the small stage, their first notes pulling the crowd's attention. Nathan found himself roped into helping Maya serve jambalaya, carrying bowls to tables while she darted between tasks. Their hands brushed as they passed plates, each touch a jolt of electricity. She caught his eye once, her lips twitching like she knew exactly what he was thinking. "Keep up, Nathan," she teased, nudging his shoulder. "You're slacking." "Me? I'm a pro," he said, balancing a bowl with exaggerated care. "This is Michelin star service right here." She laughed, the sound bright against the music, and Nathan thought he could live for that sound alone. The night hit its peak when Jamal, the shy teenager Maya had been mentoring, took the stage with a guitar. The crowd hushed as he strummed a tentative chord, his voice raw but soulful, singing a cover of Ain't No Sunshine. By the end, the center erupted in applause, and Jamal's grin was wider than Lake Michigan. Maya was right there, hugging him like a proud sister. "That's my guy," she called, clapping. Then, to Nathan's horror, she turned to him, mischief in her eyes. "All right, Nathan, your turn. Show us what you got." "What?" "No way," he said, holding up his hands. "I'm no singer." "Come on, man, don't leave Jamal hanging," Tasha shouted, and the crowd joined in, chanting his name. Nathan's face burned, but Maya's grin was irresistible. "Fine," he muttered, standing. "But you owe me a whole pan of cornbread for this." He climbed onto the stage, feeling like a kid at a talent show. The band, sensing his nerves, eased into a slow jazz standard, "My Funny Valentine." Nathan's voice was rough, far from polished, but he leaned into it, hamming it up for the crowd. By the second verse, people were swaying, and Maya was laughing so hard she had to lean against Tasha. When he finished, the center exploded in cheers, and Nathan bowed dramatically, his heart pounding with a joy he hadn't known in years. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Big Shot," Maya said as he returned to the buffet table, her eyes warm. She slid a bowl of jambalaya across to him, his favorite, though he'd never told her. "That was brave." "Brave or stupid," he said, still catching his breath. "You're a bad influence, Maya Robinson." "Maybe you need a little bad in your life," she replied, her voice low, teasing. For a moment their eyes locked, and the air between them crackled. Nathan's fingers twitched, wanting to reach for her hand, but a volunteer called her away, and the moment passed. As the night wound down, the crowd thinned, leaving just the core volunteers and the soft hum of the center's old speakers. Nathan lingered, helping Maya stack chairs while Tasha and Clara cleaned the kitchen. The fairy lights cast a soft glow, and the space felt like a haven, safe from the city's noise. "You didn't have to stay, you know," Maya said, wiping down a table. "You've done enough for one night." "I wanted to," Nathan said, and he meant it. "This place, it's special. You make it special." She paused, her cloth still, and looked at him. "Careful, Nathan. You keep talking like that, I might start thinking you're more than just a guy with a tech obsession." He smiled, but her words hit deeper than she knew. Every night he spent here, every laugh they shared, made it harder to keep his secret. He wasn't just Nathan, the guy who liked jambalaya and bad jazz. He was Nathan Caldwell, billionaire, and the weight of that truth was growing heavier. They worked in comfortable silence, the only sounds the clink of dishes and the faint jazz from the speakers. At one point, Maya reached for a chair at the same time he did, their hands brushing. Neither pulled away. Her skin was warm, her fingers calloused from years of work, and Nathan's heart thudded so loud he was sure she could hear it. "Sorry," she said. But she didn't move her hand, and her eyes held his, searching. Up close, he could smell her jasmine perfume, see the gold flecks in her eyes. The moment stretched, heavy with possibility. "No need to be," he murmured, his voice husky. He leaned in slightly, his breath catching as her lips parted. They were inches apart, the air charged with a heat that made his skin tingle. He wanted to kiss her, to pour out everything he felt. But then the band started packing up, the noise breaking the spell. Maya stepped back, a shaky laugh escaping her. "Your trouble, Nathan. I knew it the first night at that gala. Only the good kind," he said, echoing their earlier banter. But his voice was softer now, more serious. She shook her head, smiling, and turned to finish cleaning. But Nathan felt the pull between them, stronger than ever. The night wasn't without its shadows. As Nathan helped Maya lock up, Tasha pulled her aside, her voice low but sharp. "I'm telling you, Maya, that guy's too good to be true. Nobody shows up every week just for jazz. You sure he's not playing you?" "Tasha, chill," Maya said, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "He's just nice. Not everyone's got an agenda." Tasha said, unconvinced. "Just watch yourself, girl." Nathan caught the tail end of the conversation, his stomach twisting. Tasha wasn't wrong to be suspicious. She was closer to the truth than she knew. But as he glanced at Maya, laughing as she adjusted a poster on the door, he pushed the guilt down. He wasn't ready to lose this. Not yet. Then there was Elliot Hayes, Nathan's best friend since college. Elliot worked at Bright Futures, his warm demeanor a perfect fit for Maya's mission. Nathan had always admired Elliot's heart, the way he'd slept on Nathan's couch during the early days of Apex, believing in his vision when no one else did. But tonight, Nathan noticed something else. The way Elliot's eyes followed Maya, quiet and steady, full of a love he hadn't confessed. When Elliot joined them to lock up, his smile was friendly but strained, and Nathan felt a pang of unease. Was Elliot a rival, or just a friend who saw Maya the way Nathan did? Outside, the city was quiet, the streets slick with the last of the day's rain. Maya hugged her jacket tighter, turning to Nathan. "Thanks for tonight. You didn't have to sing, but you made Jamal's night." "Anytime," Nathan said, meaning it. "You need a ride home? It's getting chilly." "Nah, Elliot's got me," she said, nodding toward Elliot, who was waiting by his car. "See you around, Nathan." As she walked away, her figure disappearing into the night, Nathan felt a mix of hope and dread. He was falling for her, hard, and every step deeper into her world was a step closer to his secret unraveling. That jazz night was just the beginning, a moment where Nathan and Maya's worlds started to intertwine. But even the warmest nights cast shadows, and Nathan's secret is looming larger than ever. The late summer air in Chicago carried a hint of coolness, a whisper of fall creeping into the city. Inside Bright Futures, the community center was quieter than usual, the hum of activity subdued on a Wednesday evening. The fairy lights from jazz night were gone, but the space still held a warmth, faint traces of Maya's jambalaya lingering in the air, the soft buzz of a laptop fan as a teenager coded in the corner, and the low strum of a jazz playlist from a battered speaker. Nathan Caldwell sat at a folding table, pretending to read a grant proposal, but his eyes kept drifting to Maya Robinson. Maya moved through the center with her usual grace, her curly hair pulled into a high bun, a pencil tucked behind her ear, a habit Nathan found endlessly charming. Her red t-shirt and jeans were casual, but she carried herself with a quiet authority, checking in with volunteers and adjusting a poster on the wall. Her warm brown skin caught the glow of the overhead lights, and her eyes, when they met his, held a spark that made his pulse quicken. 3 months into his regular visits to Bright Futures, Nathan was in deep. Maya wasn't just a woman he admired. She was a force, a fire, and he was falling harder every day. But tonight, something was off. Maya's smile was tighter, her movements clipped. Nathan noticed her glancing at her phone, her brow furrowing as she scrolled through emails. He'd seen that look before, last week, when she'd mentioned the center's budget woes, her voice low as she confided in him over coffee. "We're barely keeping the lights on," she'd said, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "I'm picking up extra shifts at the coffee shop, but it's not enough." Nathan had nodded, his mind racing with ways to help, but he'd stayed quiet. Maya was proud, fiercely independent, and he knew she'd hate anything that smelled like charity. Still, the urge to fix things gnawed at him. Nathan was the billionaire CEO of Apex Innovations, a man who could move millions with a phone call. Bright Futures was Maya's heart, her dream of empowering kids through tech, and it was struggling. He'd seen the outdated laptops, the flickering lights, the stress etched in Maya's face. He could make it all go away, if only she'd let him. But Maya wasn't the kind of woman who wanted saving, and that made his secret. The fact that he was Nathan Caldwell, not just Nathan, the guy who helps out, feel like a betrayal waiting to happen. The center's door swung open, and Elliot Hayes walked in, carrying a box of donated books. Nathan's best friend since college, Elliot was a steady presence at Bright Futures, his warm demeanor a perfect fit for Maya's mission. He was tall with sandy hair and kind eyes, and tonight he nodded at Nathan with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Nathan had been noticing it more lately, the way Elliot's gaze lingered on Maya, soft and unspoken, full of a love he hadn't voiced. It stirred a flicker of jealousy in Nathan, one he tried to ignore. Elliot was his brother in all but blood, the guy who'd believed in Apex when it was just a dream. But when it came to Maya, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that Elliot was a rival. "Hey, Maya, got those books you wanted?" Elliot called, setting the box down. "Figured the kids could use some new reads." Maya's face lit up, her tension easing. "You're a lifesaver, Elliot. Thanks for always coming through." "Anytime," he said, his voice soft, and Nathan caught the way Maya's smile lingered. It was small, but it hit him like a punch. Was there something between them, or was he reading too much into it? He pushed the thought aside, focusing on Maya as she approached his table. "You're awful quiet tonight, Mr. Big Shot," she said, her tone teasing but her eyes searching. "What's got you so deep in thought?" "Just trying to keep up with you," he said, flashing a grin. "You're running this place like a general." She snorted, leaning against the table close enough that he could smell her jasmine perfume. "Flattery won't get you free jambalaya, Nathan. You sure you're okay? You've been distracted." Before he could answer, Tasha Carter's voice cut through the room, sharp and urgent. "Maya, you need to check this email. Like, now." Maya frowned, pulling out her phone as Tasha hurried over, her braids bouncing. Tasha shot Nathan a skeptical look, her eyes narrowing as she handed Maya the phone. "It's from the foundation board. You're not gonna believe this." Nathan's stomach twisted. He had a bad feeling about this. Last week, after seeing Maya's stress, he'd made a call, a discreet one, or so he thought. Through a foundation he quietly funded, he'd arranged a $100,000 grant for Bright Futures, channeled anonymously to avoid suspicion. It was meant to cover new equipment, staff salaries, maybe even a down payment on a bigger space. He'd been careful, or so he thought, but Tasha's tone told him something had gone wrong. Maya's eyes widened as she read the email, her breath catching. $100 grand? She whispered, her voice a mix of shock and disbelief. An anonymous donor. For us? The center erupted in cheers. Jamal high-fived Kayla, Clara clapped from the doorway, and even Elliot grinned, his eyes bright. Maya's face was a storm of emotions. Joy, relief, but also a flicker of suspicion. She turned to Nathan, her gaze piercing. "Nathan, you know anything about this?" The air thickened, the jazz playlist fading into the background. Nathan's heart pounded, but he forced a casual shrug, his voice steady. "Me? I'm just a volunteer, Maya. Sounds like you've got a guardian angel out there." Her eyes narrowed, studying him like she could see through his facade. "Right," she said, her tone clipped. "A guardian angel who just happens to show up right when we're drowning." The words hung between them, sharp and heavy. Nathan held her gaze, his mind racing. He wanted to tell her, "I did it for you, for the kids, because I can't stand seeing you carry this alone." But the memory of her pride, the way she'd bristled at the gala when he'd offered to help, stopped him. She didn't want his money, she wanted his trust, his honesty, and he was failing her. "Maya, come on," Tasha said, her voice low but firm. "You don't think this is a little convenient? Mr. Big Shot here's been hanging around a lot." "Tasha, enough," Maya snapped, but her eyes didn't leave Nathan's. She tucked her phone into her pocket, her jaw tight. "We'll talk about this later. I've got work to do." She walked away, her shoulders stiff, and Nathan felt the distance between them grow, even though she was only a few feet away. The center's warmth, once his refuge, felt stifling now, and he knew he'd crossed a line. The next few nights were strained. Maya was still warm, still brought him coffee during events, but there was a guarded edge to her smile, a hesitation in her laugh. Nathan hated it, hated knowing he'd put it there. He tried to keep things light, joking about the center's ancient printer or asking about her latest coding class. But her responses were short, her eyes searching for answers he wasn't ready to give. Tasha, as usual, wasn't helping. She cornered Maya after a workshop, her voice carrying just enough for Nathan to overhear. "I'm telling you, Maya, that grant's fishy. And your boy Nathan? He's not just some random volunteer. You see how he looks at you, like he's got plans." "Tasha, stop," Maya said, but her tone lacked conviction. "He's been good to us. Maybe he's just generous." "Generous?" Tasha snorted. "Guys like him don't give without wanting something back. You're too trusting, girl." Nathan pretended to adjust a laptop, his chest tight. Tasha was too close to the truth, and every day he didn't come clean, the lie grew heavier. He'd wanted to help Maya, to lighten her load, but he'd done it in the shadows, without her consent. It was a mistake, and he was starting to see how much it might cost him. Clara, Maya's mother, noticed the shift too. She was a quiet presence at Bright Futures, her health fragile but her wisdom sharp. She caught Nathan's eye as he helped Jamal with a coding project, her expression unreadable. "You're stirring up trouble, aren't you, son?" she said, half teasing, half serious. "Me? Never," Nathan said, forcing a grin, but Clara's knowing look stayed with him as he left. The breaking point came a few nights later, after a long day left Maya exhausted, her eyes shadowed from extra shifts. Nathan couldn't stand it. He stayed late, helping her clean up after a coding workshop, the center empty except for the two of them. The air was cool, the fairy lights casting a soft glow. Maya was wiping down a table, her movements slow, her shoulders slumped. "You don't have to do this, you know," she said, glancing at him as he stacked chairs. "You're a volunteer, not my personal assistant." "I like it," Nathan said, and he meant it. "Keeps me grounded." She snorted, but her smile was genuine, the first real one he'd seen in days. They worked in silence, the rhythm familiar, almost intimate. At one point, Maya reached for a chair at the same time he did, their hands brushing. The touch was electric, and neither pulled away. Her skin was warm, her fingers calloused, and Nathan's heart raced. "Maya," he started, his voice low, but she stepped closer, her eyes searching his. "Don't," she said, but her voice was soft, almost pleading. "Don't say anything unless it's the truth." The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken desire. Nathan could smell her jasmine perfume, see the way her breath hitched. He wanted to kiss her, to tell her everything. "I'm Nathan Caldwell. I made the grant happen. I'm falling for you." But the fear of losing her stopped him. Instead, he leaned in, his fingers grazing her shoulder as he adjusted her apron strap. Her eyes fluttered shut for a second, and he thought she might lean into him, but then she stepped back, her expression conflicted. "We should keep this simple, Nathan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't handle complicated right now." He nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, simple." But as she turned away, locking the door, Nathan knew nothing about this was simple. He'd crossed a line with the grant, and Maya's trust was slipping through his fingers. Bright Futures, once his sanctuary, felt like a stage where he was playing a role he couldn't sustain. Outside, the city was alive with headlights and distant music. Nathan stood under the center's faded sign, his breath visible in the cool air. He thought of Maya's words, "Don't say anything unless it's the truth," and the email she'd read. He'd wanted to help, to give her a break, but he'd done it wrong, and now he was paying the price. Bright Futures was more than a non-profit to Maya. It was her legacy, her fight, and Nathan, with his hidden billions and good intentions, was threatening to break it. The Chicago sky was a bruised gray, heavy with the promise of rain, casting a muted light over Bright Futures. Inside the community center, the usual warmth was strained, the air thick with the scent of coffee, and the faint hum of a jazz playlist struggling to lift the mood. The concrete walls, usually vibrant with posters and kids' artwork, felt stark tonight. The fairy lights dimmed. Maya Robinson moved through the space with a forced smile, her curly hair tied back, her red apron over a black sweater and jeans. She was serving lemonade to a small group of volunteers, her voice warm as she thanked them for their help with a coding workshop, but her eyes were shadowed, her movements tense. Nathan Caldwell sat at a folding table near the back, his flannel shirt slightly rumpled, a stack of flyers in front of him. His dark brown hair fell into his green eyes, which kept drifting to Maya. 4 months into his regular visits to Bright Futures, Nathan was in deeper than he'd ever been. Maya was more than a crush. She was a fire, a force, and every moment with her felt like a gift he didn't deserve. But the secret he'd been carrying, that he was Nathan Caldwell, billionaire CEO of Apex Innovations, was a weight he couldn't shake. The anonymous grant he'd arranged for the center, meant to ease Maya's burdens, had sparked her suspicion, and the distance between them was growing, even as their chemistry burned hotter. Tonight, the center was quieter, with only a handful of regulars. Jamal tinkering with a laptop, Kayla organizing supplies, Clara watching from a corner with her sharp, knowing eyes. Nathan tried to focus on the flyers, but his mind was on Maya. He'd seen her limping slightly yesterday, a sign of the extra shifts she'd taken to keep Bright Futures afloat. He'd wanted to help, to tell her the truth about the grant, but every time he opened his mouth, the fear of losing her stopped him. She didn't want his money. She wanted his honesty, and he was failing her. Tasha Carter was behind the coffee station, her braids pulled back, her eyes flicking between Maya and her phone. Tasha had never trusted Nathan, her instincts honed from years of protecting Maya from smooth talkers with agendas. Tonight, she was quieter than usual, her fingers tapping the counter as she scrolled through something on her screen. Nathan caught her glance, sharp and suspicious, and his stomach knotted. He had a bad feeling, one that grew when Tasha's eyes widened, her jaw tightening. "Maya, you gotta see this," Tasha said, her voice cutting through the center's hum. She strode over, phone in hand, her expression a mix of triumph and fury. "I knew it. I knew he wasn't just some volunteer." Maya turned, her brow furrowing as she took the phone. The center went quiet, the volunteers pausing, sensing the shift. Clara leaned forward in her chair, her eyes narrowing, while Elliot Hayes, who'd just walked in with a box of cables, froze by the door. Nathan's heart pounded, his hands gripping the flyers. He didn't need to see the screen to know what was coming. He'd been careful, or thought he had, but the truth had a way of slipping through. Maya's breath caught as she read, her eyes scanning the article. Her face changed, shock, then betrayal, her lips parting as she looked up at Nathan. "Nathan Caldwell," she said, her voice low, not a question, but a verdict. CEO of Apex Innovations. Billionaire. Not just Nathan, the guy who stacks chairs. The words hung in the air, heavy as the storm clouds outside. The center felt smaller, the walls closing in. Nathan stood, his hands raised, desperate to bridge the gap. "Maya, I can explain." "Explain?" Her voice rose, sharp and raw, cutting him off. She stepped closer, the phone still in her hand, the article glowing like an accusation. "You've been coming here for 4 months, Nathan. 4 months of coffee, jazz, and I'm just a guy. You let me think you were one of us, and the whole time you were, what? Playing a role? Slumming it for kicks?" The accusation stung, and Nathan felt every eye in the room, Jamal's, Kayla's, Clara's, Elliot's, boring into him. He shook his head, his voice urgent. "It wasn't like that, Maya. I didn't tell you because I didn't want it to change this, us. People look at me differently when they know, and I couldn't bear that from you." "Couldn't bear it?" Her laugh was bitter, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You think I'm that shallow? You think I'd care about your money? She gestured around the center, her voice trembling with pride. This place, these kids, my life. I built it with my own hands. I don't need your billions, Nathan. I needed your trust. Tasha crossed her arms, leaning against a table. Told you, Maya. He's been playing you from the jump. That Grant? Bet he's behind that too. Tasha, enough, Clara said, her voice firm but calm. She stood, her gray hair pulled back, her eyes locked on Nathan. You got something to say, son. Now's the time. Nathan's chest tightened. He looked at Maya, her arms crossed, her jaw set, and knew this was his chance, maybe his only chance, to salvage what they had. Maya, I never meant to hurt you. I came here by accident that first night at the gala. I was lost. My life's all deals and boardrooms, people who want something from me. But here, with you, I felt real. Your fire, your heart, this place. It's the only thing that's felt like home in years. Maya's expression softened for a fraction of a second, her eyes flickering with the memory of their moments. Jazz night, their near kiss, the way he'd laughed with her kids. But then her resolve hardened. So you lied to feel real? You let me open up, let me care about you, and you didn't think I deserved the truth? I didn't lie about who I am, he said, his voice desperate. Not the important parts. The way I feel about you, Maya, that's real. I've never felt this way about anyone. Feel about me? Her voice broke, and she stepped closer, her eyes blazing. You don't get to say that when you've been hiding who you are. You don't get to act like my heart's some game you can play. The words cut deeper than any boardroom loss. Nathan took a step toward her, but she held up a hand, stopping him. I need you to leave, Nathan, she said, her voice steady now, though it cost her. I can't do this. Not now. The center was silent, the jazz playlist looping unnoticed. Nathan wanted to argue, to beg, but the pain in her eyes told him it was useless. He grabbed his jacket, his movements slow, like moving through water. I'm sorry, Maya, he said, his voice barely audible. More than you'll ever know. As he walked out, the door's creak echoed like a final note, a sound that had once felt like belonging, but now marked the end of something. The rain had started, a light drizzle coating the street, and Nathan stood under the center's faded sign, feeling emptier than he ever had. Inside Bright Futures, Maya stood frozen, Tasha's phone on the table, the article still glowing. The volunteers resumed their tasks, their voices hushed, respectful of the storm that had passed. Clara put a hand on Maya's shoulder, her touch grounding. You all right, baby? Clara asked, her voice soft. Maya shook her head, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't know, Mama. I thought he was different. He might still be, Clara said, her tone careful. But you're right to call him out. Trust is everything. Tasha, still fuming, crossed her arms. I knew he was trouble. All that I'm just a guy nonsense. Billionaires don't hang out in community centers unless they're up to something. Stop it, Tasha, Maya said, her voice sharp. I don't need you piling on. I need to think. She grabbed a rag and started wiping down a table, her movements mechanical, but her mind was racing. She'd felt something with Nathan, something real, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, the way his hand brushed hers and sent sparks through her, the way he'd sung jazz with Jamal like he belonged. But now she didn't know who he was. The man she'd laughed with, nearly kissed, was a stranger with a life she couldn't fathom. Elliot approached, his expression gentle. You okay, Maya? He asked, setting down the box of cables. That was intense. "I'll be fine," she said, forcing a smile. But Elliot's steady presence, his quiet support, made her heart ache. He'd always been there, a friend who never pushed, never lied. Why couldn't she feel for him what she felt for Nathan? The next few days were a haze. Maya threw herself into work, teaching coding classes and planning fundraisers, but Nathan's absence was a void. The table where he'd sat stayed empty, and she caught herself glancing at the door, half expecting his familiar grin. Tasha kept up her warnings, convinced Nathan was a rich guy looking for a thrill, while Clara offered softer advice, urging Maya to listen to her heart. Elliot was a constant, bringing her coffee, helping with the kids, his kindness a balm to her raw emotions. One night, as they locked up, he touched her arm, his voice low. "You don't have to go through this alone, Maya. I'm here." "Gee." She nodded, her throat tight, but her mind was on Nathan, the way he'd looked at her, broken and honest, when she told him to leave. Part of her wanted to believe him, to believe the man who danced with her under fairy lights was real. But the other part, the part that had fought for every inch of her life, couldn't forgive the lie. Nathan was unraveling. He buried himself in work, signing contracts and dodging Ray's pointed questions. "You look like hell, boss," Ray said one evening, leaning against the door of Nathan's office. "What happened with your girl?" "She's not my girl," Nathan muttered, staring at the city skyline. "And I messed it up, big time." "Then fix it," Ray said, his tone blunt. "Money won't do it. You gotta show up as you, not some undercover billionaire." Nathan nodded, but fixing it felt impossible. Maya's words, "I needed your trust," echoed in his head, a reminder of how badly he'd misjudged. He'd thought hiding his identity would protect their connection, but all it did was prove he didn't believe in her strength. Bright Futures wasn't the same without Nathan. The kids asked about him, and Maya brushed it off with a smile, but the ache lingered. She kept replaying the confrontation, the hurt in his eyes, the way he'd said he felt about her. Part of her wanted to call him, to hear his side, but pride and fear held her back. The question was, could she ever trust him again? The Chicago skyline loomed under a heavy autumn sky, the first chill of the season creeping through the city's streets. Inside Bright Futures, the community center was a shadow of its usual vibrancy. The fairy lights were packed away, the jukebox silent, replaced by the low hum of a flickering fluorescent bulb. The scent of coffee lingered, but it was stale, a reminder of the long hours Maya Robinson had been pouring into keeping the center alive. The concrete walls, once alive with kids' artwork, felt cold, the posters curling at the edges. Maya stood behind a folding table, sorting through budget spreadsheets, her curly hair pulled into a messy bun, her red apron swapped for a worn sweater. Her warm brown eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, her movements mechanical as she fought a losing battle. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation that drove Nathan Caldwell out of Bright Futures, his billionaire identity exposed like a wound. Maya had thrown herself into work, teaching coding classes, organizing fundraisers, and picking up extra shifts at a coffee shop to cover the center's bills. But the ache of Nathan's betrayal lingered, a constant weight in her chest. She missed him, the way his green eyes softened when he looked at her, the way his laugh filled the center, the way his touch sent sparks through her. But he'd lied, hidden who he was, and the trust she'd started to build had crumbled. Every time she passed the table where he'd sat, she felt the void, a reminder of what could have been. Tonight, a new threat loomed. Clara, Maya's mother, had called an emergency meeting after closing, her voice tight as she gathered Maya, Tasha, Elliot, and a few key volunteers in the center's small office. The news was devastating. Bright Futures was 3 months from losing its building. A developer had bought up the block for luxury condos, and the lease was set to expire. Clara, her gray hair pulled back, her eyes weary, laid it out plain. We've got 90 days, maybe less, after that. This place is gone unless we find a miracle. Maya's heart sank. Bright Futures wasn't just a job. It was her legacy, her fight for the kids in her community. Her mother had inspired it, her grandmother's recipes fed it, and every line of code taught here was a step toward a better future. Losing it felt like losing her soul. "We'll fight it," Maya said, her voice fierce despite the tears prickling her eyes. "We'll fundraise, talk to the city council, something." Clara squeezed her hand, her touch steady but sad. "We'll try, baby. But these developers play dirty. We need more than grit this time." Tasha crossed her arms, her braids swinging. "This is gentrification straight up. They want our neighborhood for their high-rises, and we're just collateral damage." Maya nodded, her jaw tight. She thought of Nathan, the billionaire who'd sat in her center, pretending to be one of them. Was he part of this world, moving money while places like Bright Futures were erased? The thought made her stomach churn. But a deeper part of her, the part that remembered his touch, his confession, wanted to believe he was different. Across town, Nathan Caldwell was drowning in his own regret. His office at Apex Innovations was a fortress of glass and steel, the Chicago skyline sprawling below like a chessboard he'd once mastered. He stood by the window, his tie loosened, a glass of bourbon untouched on his desk. The past 2 weeks had been torture. Meetings, deals, and late-night strategy sessions filled his days, but his mind was stuck on Maya, her hurt eyes, her voice telling him to leave. He'd thought hiding his identity would protect what they had, but it had only proved he didn't trust her strength. Ray, his assistant and confidant, had called him out the night before, his voice blunt over a beer. "You love her, don't you? Then stop hiding and fix this, man. Money ain't the answer. She wants you, the real you." Nathan knew Ray was right, but fixing it felt like climbing a mountain with no map. The grant he'd arranged for Bright Futures had sparked Maya's suspicion, and her reaction to his identity had shown how deeply he'd misjudged. Still, he couldn't let go. He'd hired a consultant, not to spy, but to understand the center's challenges, to find ways to help without overstepping. The report came back with grim details. Maya's extra shifts, the center's mounting debts, and now, the developer's threat to buy the building. Each fact was a reminder of how much she carried and how little he'd done to earn her trust. When he learned about the developer's plan, something snapped. Bright Futures was Maya's heart, the soul of her community. He couldn't let it vanish. Late one night, he made a call, setting up a foundation to preserve community spaces. By morning, his team had bought the building and secured a long-term lease at a locked-in rate, ensuring Bright Futures could stay open. It was a quiet move, channeled through the foundation to keep his name out of it. But Nathan knew it was a risk. Maya didn't want his money, she wanted his honesty, and he was still failing her. The news broke a week later, not through Nathan's careful planning, but through a local news article. Maya was at Bright Futures, teaching a coding class, when Tasha burst in, waving her phone. "Maya, you gotta see this. Someone bought the building. Bright Futures is safe." Maya's heart leaped, relief flooding her, but it was short-lived. Tasha read the article aloud, her voice faltering as she reached the key detail. The purchase was funded by the Caldwell Foundation, with Nathan Caldwell listed as a primary donor. The center went quiet, the kids exchanging glances, Clara's eyes narrowing. Maya felt the air leave her lungs. "Nathan," she whispered, her hands trembling. It wasn't just the grant. He'd gone behind her back again, using his money to fix her life without asking. The betrayal cut deeper than his hidden identity, because this time he'd known how much trust meant to her. Tasha slammed her phone down. "I told you, Maya. He's playing God with our lives. Thinks he can buy us like one of his startups." "Enough, Tasha," Maya snapped, but her voice shook. She grabbed her jacket, her mind racing. She needed answers, and she wasn't waiting for Nathan to show up with another excuse. The Apex Innovations Tower was a monolith of glass, its lobby gleaming with marble and chrome. Maya stood there, her worn sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, her denim jacket out of place among the suits and briefcases. The receptionist raised an eyebrow, but Maya's determination was unshakable. "I need to see Nathan Caldwell, now." Up on the 40th floor, Nathan was in a meeting, his board droning on about market trends. When his assistant buzzed him about a Maya Robinson in the lobby, his heart stopped. He excused himself, ignoring the board's murmurs, and met her in his office, the city sprawling below like a distant dream. Maya stood by the window, her arms crossed, her eyes blazing. She looked small in the vast office, but her presence filled the room, her strength undeniable. "You bought the building," she said, her voice low, dangerous. "After everything, you went behind my back again." Nathan's throat tightened. He'd expected this, but seeing her here, in his world, made it real. "Maya, I didn't mean—" "Don't!" She cut him off, stepping closer, her eyes flashing. "Don't tell me what you meant. You think you can throw money at my life and make it better? You think I'm some project you can save?" "No," he said, his voice urgent, stepping toward her. "It's not about that. Bright futures, it's your heart, Maya. It's everything you've built. I couldn't let it go." "You don't get to decide that," she shouted, her voice echoing off the glass. "You don't get to play hero when you're the one who lied. You knew how I felt about trust, and you still did this. Why, Nathan? Why can't you just be honest with me?" The question pierced him, raw and exposed. Nathan closed the distance, his hands outstretched, his voice breaking. "Because I love you," he said, the words spilling out, unstoppable. "I love you, Maya, and I couldn't stand watching you fight this alone. I thought I was helping, but I see now. I was wrong. I should have talked to you, trusted you. I'm sorry." Maya's eyes widened, her breath catching. For a moment, the anger in her face softened, replaced by a vulnerability that mirrored the longing in his voice. Her lips parted, and Nathan thought she might step into him, might let him hold her. But then she shook her head, stepping back, her voice steady but laced with pain. "Love doesn't work like this, Nathan. It's not about fixing things in the dark. It's about showing up, being real, even when it's hard." "I know," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm trying, Maya. I want to be that guy, the one you can trust. But I don't know how to do this without messing it up." "Then figure it out," she said, her eyes glistening. "But don't expect me to wait while you do." She turned, walking out, her steps echoing in the sterile office, leaving Nathan alone with the city lights mocking him from below. Back at Bright Futures, Maya threw herself into work, but the victory of the center's survival was hollow. Clara tried to lift her spirits, sharing stories of the community's resilience, but Maya's mind was on Nathan, his confession, the raw honesty in his eyes. She hated how much it hurt, how much she missed him even now. Elliot, ever steady, noticed her turmoil. "You don't have to do this alone, Maya," he said one night, helping her lock up. His hand lingered on her arm, his eyes soft. "I'm here, you know." "I know," she said, her throat tight, but her heart was torn. Elliot was safe, reliable, but Nathan was a fire she couldn't extinguish. His love had felt real, but it came wrapped in secrets. Could she separate the man from the money? Tasha was relentless. "He's a billionaire, Maya. They don't change. He'll keep pulling strings, thinking he owns you." But Clara, wiping down a table, offered a different perspective. "People mess up, Maya. Doesn't mean they can't learn. Question is, do you think he's worth the chance?" Maya didn't have an answer. The center was safe, but her heart wasn't. And Nathan, the man who danced with her and confessed his love, was still out there, carrying a piece of her she wasn't sure she could reclaim. Nathan wasn't giving up. He sat in his office, the city dark below, and made a decision. No more secrets, no more shadows. If he wanted Maya back, he had to show up as himself, flaws, billions and all. But the clock was ticking, and Bright Futures wasn't out of danger yet. The developers were challenging the lease, and Nathan knew this was his chance to prove he could be the man Maya needed, not by buying her world, but by standing in it. The Chicago church was a vision of elegance, its stained glass windows casting jewel-toned light across rows of white roses and polished pews. The air was heavy with the scent of lilies and anticipation, the soft hum of a string quartet weaving through the murmurs of guests. Maya Robinson stood at the altar, radiant in a flowing white gown, her curly hair cascading over her shoulders, her warm brown eyes glowing with a mix of joy and resolve. She was about to marry Elliot Hayes, the man who'd been her rock, her steady presence through years of struggle. But as she faced the crowd, her gaze flickered to the back of the church, where Nathan Caldwell stood, hidden behind a marble column, his heart breaking. Nathan's dark brown hair was neatly combed, his tailored suit accentuating his broad shoulders, but his green eyes were stormy, filled with love and regret. He wasn't supposed to be here, not as a guest, not as the best man he'd agreed to be. He'd slipped in quietly, unable to stay away, needing to see her one last time. The confrontation in his office 3 weeks ago, when Maya had walked out after his confession of love, had left him shattered. He'd poured his heart out, admitted his mistakes, but she'd chosen Elliot. And Nathan couldn't blame her. Elliot was honest, steadfast, everything Nathan hadn't been. Yet the memory of their kiss in the rain, the fire in her touch, haunted him. The minister's voice echoed, asking if anyone objected to the union, and Nathan's breath caught. 100 scenarios flashed through his mind, standing up, professing his love, begging her to choose him. But as Maya's eyes met his, just for a split second, he saw something. Acknowledgement, forgiveness, a quiet goodbye. It was enough to anchor him, to remind him what love meant. He stayed silent, his hand gripping the pew until his knuckles whitened, letting her go. This was the moment Nathan learned to love by letting go. But it wasn't the end of their story. Stay with me as we unravel how Nathan and Maya found peace, not in each other's arms, but in a deeper understanding of trust and sacrifice. If this moment in the church touched you, let's dive into the resolution. The weeks following the office confrontation had been a crucible for Maya. Bright Futures was safe, its building secured by Nathan's foundation, but the victory felt hollow. She threw herself into wedding preparations with Elliot, choosing flowers and tasting cakes. But her mind kept drifting to Nathan, his raw confession, the way his voice broke when he said he loved her. She hated how much she missed him, the way his absence left a void no amount of work could fill. Every time she passed the table where he'd sat, she remembered his laugh, his touch, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only person in the world. Clara, her mother, noticed the change. One evening, as they cooked jambalaya in Clara's small kitchen, the scent of bell peppers and cayenne filling the air, Clara spoke up. "You're carrying a weight, baby. Is it that boy, Nathan?" Maya sighed, stirring the pot. "I don't know, Mama. He lied, he meddled, but he also saved the center. I'm all mixed up." "Love's like that," Clara said, her eyes sharp despite her frail frame. "But you gotta listen to your heart. What's it telling you?" Maya didn't answer, but Clara's words lingered. She thought of Elliot, his steady kindness, his unwavering support. He was her safe harbor, the man who'd never let her down. But Nathan was a fire, a passion she couldn't extinguish, and the conflict tore at her. The turning point came unexpectedly. Maya was at Bright Futures, teaching a coding class, when the center's director pulled her aside. "We've got a new program starting," he said, handing her a flyer. "Tech training for the kids, fully funded, with scholarships for college. Guess who's behind it? Apex Innovations. Nathan Caldwell signed off himself." Maya's breath caught, her fingers tracing the flyer. The program was public, transparent, offering free courses in AI and web development to every kid at Bright Futures. It wasn't a secret donation or a backdoor fix. It was a commitment to her community, inspired by her work. Nathan hadn't reached out, hadn't asked for credit or forgiveness. He'd done it because it mattered to her, to the kids she'd dedicated her life to. She sat in the empty classroom, the flyer in her hands, and felt the walls around her heart crack. Nathan wasn't perfect. He'd lied, overstepped, but he was trying, really trying, to be the man he'd promised, and she couldn't deny what she felt. The spark when their hands brushed, the heat of his kiss in the rain, the way he'd stood in her world and made it better, even when he faltered. The night before the wedding, Maya made a decision. She texted Nathan, her fingers trembling as she typed, "Meet me at Greenhaven Park, 7 a.m. Need to talk." It was the same park where they'd shared sandwiches, where their story had begun, and now, where it would end. Nathan arrived first, the morning mist curling around the oak trees, the air sharp with the scent of wet grass. He wore a simple jacket, his hair damp from the drizzle, his green eyes nervous but hopeful. When Maya appeared, she was breathtaking, even in jeans and a sweater, her curly hair loose, her eyes carrying a weight he recognized. Love, regret, resolve. "I needed to see you," she said, her voice steady but soft, stopping a few feet away. "Before everything changes." Nathan's heart raced, hope warring with dread. "Maya, Let me finish," she said, holding up a hand. "All these years, Nathan, I waited for you. Those nights at the center, the way you looked at me, I thought you felt it too. I loved you, you know. But you never chose me. Elliot, he saw me every day without hesitation. I can't hurt him." Nathan's throat tightened, her words a blade. "I did love you," he said, his voice raw. "I was just too scared, too caught up in my world to see what was right in front of me. I'd give anything to go back, to do it right." She stepped closer, her eyes glistening. "I know, and I believe you. But love isn't enough if it's built on secrets. I would have chosen you, Nathan, but you didn't choose me when it mattered." The truth of her words broke him, and he reached for her, his hands cupping her face. "I'm so sorry, Maya," he whispered, and then he kissed her, a desperate, passionate kiss that held all the love he'd failed to give. She kissed him back, her hands clutching his jacket, their breaths mingling in the cold air. It was a goodbye, a release, and when she pulled away, her eyes were wet but clear. "I'll always love you," she said, stepping back. "But Elliot is my home now." Nathan nodded, his heart shattering but his resolve firm. "Be happy, Maya. That's all I want." She smiled, a small, sad curve of her lips, and walked away, leaving him in the mist, the rain starting to fall again. The wedding was a blur for Nathan. He stood through the ceremony, his silence a vow to honor Maya's choice. When the minister asked for objections, his heart pounded, but her glance, brief, knowing, kept him grounded. He delivered a speech at the reception, not the polished one he'd prepared, but words from the heart. "Love is about wanting someone's happiness, even when it's not with you," he said, raising a glass to Maya and Elliot, their grateful smiles a bittersweet gift. Elliot found him later on the terrace, the city lights twinkling below. You knew, didn't you? He asked, his voice quiet. About your feelings for her, all along. Nathan nodded, unable to lie. I should have said something years ago, but I didn't want to lose either of you. Elliot put a hand on his shoulder, the gesture familiar yet new. You haven't lost us, man. But maybe it's time you found yourself. 6 months later, Nathan was in a small cafe in Lisbon, the scent of espresso and pastries filling the air. He'd stepped back from Apex, taking a sabbatical to rediscover who he was beyond the billionaire title. He'd picked up photography, capturing street scenes and strangers' smiles, and started writing, pouring his lessons into words. The raw pain of losing Maya had softened, replaced by a quiet peace. Maya and Elliot visited him during a European trip, their ease surprising him. Over dinner, they shared their plans, a new foundation combining Maya's vision with Elliot's organizational skills. We want you involved, Maya said, her eyes warm, no longer carrying the weight of their past. Not just your money, Nathan, your heart. He agreed, and as they worked together remotely, Nathan saw the truth. Love took many forms. The universe hadn't denied him. It had given him a lesson in vulnerability, in showing up fully. He started dating again, approaching relationships with an openness he'd never allowed before, and found joy in small moments. A laugh shared with a stranger, a sunset over the Tagus River. Back in Chicago, Bright Futures thrived, its new tech program a beacon for the community. Maya led with her trademark fire, Elliot at her side, and Nathan's contributions, open, transparent, strengthened their work. One night, during a virtual jazz night fundraiser, Nathan and Maya shared a moment on the call, their smiles warm, their connection a testament to what they'd overcome. Nathan stood on a Lisbon balcony, the city alive below, and thought of Maya, not with pain, but with gratitude. She'd taught him what love meant, sacrifice, honesty, and the courage to let go. He was a better man for it, ready to live with an open heart no matter the risk. This is the end of Nathan and Maya's journey, a story of love that transcended romance to teach trust and sacrifice. If their story moved you, hit that subscribe button to catch more tales like this. What did you learn from Nathan and Maya? Would you have stayed silent like Nathan, or fought for love? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going.